Okay, I think we can start. Welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be calling from. I'm so excited to welcome you all on behalf of WEDO and AWID into the space for this brief but absolutely warm, insightful hour of conversation we're going to have. It's going to be an hour full of fun, celebration, and reflection. We are so grateful that folks are joining, and we know people are going to continue to roll in over the next few minutes. So welcome. And before we get started, just a couple of notes on tech and logistics. For today's conversation, we have interpretation into Spanish and French available. To access these interpretations, go to the bottom of the Zoom bar and you'll see a symbol that looks like a tiny globe. You can go ahead and press it and choose the language you wish to listen to and engage with today's conversation in. Thank you to our interpreters, Chloe, Simon, Maria, and Flavia for supporting us today. And welcome to all the new people who have just joined us. We're just going through some tech and logistics about interpretation into Spanish and French. My name is Suman. My pronouns are she, they. I am a Dalit queer feminist from India, and I've been working with WEDO for the past 6 months as a digital communications associate. I have with me Mata Music here from AWID as my co-moderator. I'll hand it over to Mata to introduce herself.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be here today and co-moderate the event with Suman and WEDO. My name is Marta Musitch, and I'm a young queer feminist from ex-Yugoslavia. My pronouns are they, them, and I've been working at AWID for a year now as the coordinator of the Building Feminist Economies team. And over to you, Suman.
Thank you so much, Mata. So we want today's conversation to be a community space where we come together and share our experiences and thoughts. So please feel free to use the chat box to keep sharing them. Also, the second part of today's conversation is dedicated to doing just that, having a community conversation and hearing more about all of you, your experiences and exploring what feminist climate justice means to us. And in the first part of the conversation, we will be hearing from our amazing panelists on what their feminist wins and challenges have been when it comes to navigating through in their organizations and movements. And on that note, let me quickly introduce you to our two amazingly powerful panelists, Maria Alejandra and Zainab Yunusa. While there is so much that can be said about them both and the transformative work they do, I'll try to give a brief introduction about them and their work. Maria Alejandra is a queer feminist from Colombia, currently working at FRIDA, the Young Feminist Fund, leading the advocacy work on climate and environmental justice. She has a master's in rural territorial development, is a human ecologist by profession, and her research focuses on the intersection between ecology, sovereignties on body territory, and participatory funding models. She loves dancing salsa, especially in queer and liberating spaces. So welcome, Maria. We are so grateful to have you here with us today. Would you like to say something about yourself to the people who have joined us and share with us one thing that's bringing you joy today?
Thank you, Sumam, for the introduction. I don't have a lot more to add at this point about myself. I would just say that all of these spaces that bring us together into conversation and discussion and collective co-creating seem so powerful to me. So I'm always very happy to be here, and I hope that this will be a good conversation for us that can feel nourishing and that can feel in community, as what you've been saying. And I'm just here and excited to share some of my own reflections, my own experiences, and how I've been observing feminist climate justice movements over the past many years. So excited to be here, and thank you for the introduction.
Thank you so much, Maria. So grateful you're here with us today. And our second panelist is Zainab Yunusa. Zainab is a youth movement and campaign coordinator with Plan International and advocates for climate justice for women and girls' rights. As a development practitioner for 6 years, Zainab works in community and international development primarily to strengthen research and advocacy, influence policies, and manage projects promoting women and girls' issues in areas of meaningful youth engagement, sexual and reproductive health and rights, inclusive governance, and climate change. Zainab is a UNICEF Youth Report Global Ambassador, a member of the UNFCCC's Youth Constituency, and a member of the Women and Gender Constituency. She leverages these platforms to advocate for inclusiveness in global climate decision-making and action. Likewise, she's a member of the UNFPA Joint Youth Working Group on SRHR and Climate Change. Zainab, welcome to the Young Feminist Virtual Meet-Up. We are so excited to have you with us. Would you like to add something or share something about you with our participants and share with us one thing that's bringing you joy today?
Thank you very much, Suman. I'm happy to be here. I'm glad to be amongst young, powerful feminists. So it always gives me joy. I think that alone is enough joy for me to be here. There's always this energy that comes with being with groups of young feminists, and I'm glad I get to witness that today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zainab. So we only have an hour with us, and there is so much that we would like to hear from all of you. The past few years and more maybe have been extremely difficult for all of us, and we had to learn to navigate through new realities and reiterate even more strongly what feminists have been voicing out for years, that the movements that we are fighting for, they do not exist in silos, but are interconnected, and hence the solutions ought to come from an intersectional space. So when we talk about climate justice, it is also very much a call for bodily autonomy, for gender equality, for anti-capitalist and anti-extractivist forms of solutions. And young intersectional feminists are at the core of and working hard to lead this intersectional climate justice movement. And it is essential that we reflect on that hard work and see the fruits that it bores. So I would like to throw this question open to our panelists. What do you consider a recent win for the feminist climate justice movement? What do you think it is a result or a reflection of? Zana, would you like to go first?
Yes, thank you very much, Suman. I'll try to make it as brief as possible. I know whenever we're talking about our achievements or wins, especially in the climate space, sometimes it feels ironical, because if we look at how much progress that we've made in in the past maybe 10 years, so it's so slow and it's so small that sometimes it feels like it feels like there's almost no progress. But I think in as much as we were moving and advocating for this, it's always good to reflect and look back at what we've achieved so far, because somehow it also keeps the hope alive. And that's what the essence of we moving and working in solidarity. So for me, if I look back the past couple of years, or even maybe just this year, what I would call a recent win, or I'd say something that has motivated me personally in the climate space journey, is with the CSW that happened earlier this year. So first of all, seeing as the CSW theme on its own was solely focused on climate change, that was interesting, because I mean, maybe a few years ago, something like this would not have been a theme like climate change would not have been the theme of the Commission on the Status of Women, that's the CSW. We always have maybe things like education, there are about other issues. And because maybe I'm coming from a space, coming from a continent, I'm from Africa, I'm Nigerian, where when you still go on the street and you talk to people about climate change, you're easily dismissed, because people would tell you that we have issue, poverty is still what is killing us, lack of education, people don't have food to eat, which are very valid reasons, but it's also because there is still not in-depth understanding of how some of these other issues like poverty, displacement, insecurity, how they are also linked to they can be indirectly linked to some of the impacts of climate change. So seeing climate change being the global focus of this global event, it was a good and encouraging and motivating moment for me. It was significant. And then not just that, it was the key of topic of this event, but also because I'm also a sexual reproductive health and rights advocate, and that is something that is close to my heart because it's something I've seen firsthand. I've seen the impact of. I've seen what happens when young women and girls in Africa and Nigeria do not have access to sexual reproductive health services, when they don't even know their rights, when they're not able to exercise their bodily autonomy, when we're seeing cases of increasing maternal mortality, young girls are out of school, all of that are under the umbrella of sexual reproductive health and rights. And so seeing that the CSW was focused on climate justice, but that there were also specific texts that was where sexual reproductive health and rights was recognized as an issue that is directly linked to climate change. That for me, as one of the outcomes of the CSW, I see it as a great win, because what this means is that it then has opened spaces for SRHR advocates like me, whenever we are advocating, whenever we are at negotiations at COP, for instance, or whenever we are at the intersectionals at Bonn, we're able to then reference these outcomes from the text of the CSW. It's a sort of a validation or approval, not that we didn't know before, but how policy making, policy negotiation works. So you're able to reference some of this text, which was something I witnessed in June at the Bonn negotiations during one of the negotiations on the Gender Action Plan. So there were still advocacy trying to see how we can incorporate sexual reproductive health and rights as a core issue, a core impact of climate change, trying to see how we can liaise and lobby for funding so that we'll have climate policies and programs that prioritize sexual reproductive health and services, especially when in places where maybe there have been natural disasters, where displacement occur, where people are then moved to internally displaced camps like IDPs that is happening in, for instance, the northeast of Nigeria, where we see that young women and girls are prioritized, their health, sexual reproductive health are prioritized. So these, starting from places like negotiation, being able to get reference some of these texts around sexual reproductive health, these are the things that you need for lobbying and negotiating to get funding for some of these programs that will now be implemented at local levels where community members get the benefit directly. So for me, seeing that it's a slow and gradual progress, but seeing
Para
that
mí es un progreso gradual. Oh, I apologize. My apologies. This is the interpreter.
Okay, that's fine. So that it makes me bold enough and re-energized going into COP27, knowing that when I'm speaking and I'm saying, oh, sexual reproductive health and rights is important along with other advocates, it doesn't look like we're speaking nonsense, because we then have something like the CSW to reference, and then just try and do more in that regard. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Anna, for also highlighting that intersection so beautifully. Maria, would you like to add to that and share your thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, thank you, Zainab, for that sort of overview of what has been achieved. I also agree that it's so powerful to look back just in the past couple of years and how much more resources, how much more information is out there about what young feminists are doing in terms of demanding and creating climate justice. And more than a specific win, I want to name that I have seen over the past 10 years or so, a tendency and a pattern about, or that shows that there's more and more young feminists occupying spaces of power, of decision-making, of narrative building. And you've named a few. We can talk about the Young Feminist Coalition at Generation Equality. We can talk about all the policy making on gender justice going on at the UN level. We can talk about positions of leadership in philanthropy and in nonprofits being occupied by young radical people. We can also talk about different movement building spaces within the climate justice movement. Like there's, I don't know how many of you have seen this Asia Solidarity Lab that people from different places in Asia are putting together for young feminist activists to come together, to elaborate, to reflect, to build community. I've seen and I've been part of queer feminists blocks within nonviolent direct action and disobedience. I see more coalitions on feminists for climate and economic justice. I see more articles being written in both mainstream, local, independent media outlets. I see, like, when I see conferences on political ecology and degrowth, all of them already have a component of what feminist politics and anti-capitalism looks like, what could look like. And I feel that occupying all of these spaces has been a huge win for the movement. And it really shows that at this point, what ecofeminists, climate justice advocates, collective movements are demanding and are created cannot be overseen anymore. And you can see, right, like, as you're saying, Sanab, I think there's different multilateral spaces that have been picking up on these political demands and these political positions. We can already see governments talking about feminist foreign policy. What does that look like, right? And obviously, I guess later on, once we talk about challenges, I'll mention what I see there as a challenge, because it can obviously be like a feminist foreign policy can be really co-opted very easily. So there's obviously a caveat there, but what I want to point out is that I see more and more young people in spaces of power, in spaces of decision making, and not just occupying them by virtue of being them, by representation, but just sitting on the table, but actually sharpening the critical analysis of the interconnections of systems of power and violence that we've been mentioning, right? Like how patriarchy, neoliberalism, racism are all interlinked and have to be tackled as such. And just to wrap up, not only is that critique being way sharper, more polished, with more examples, with more evidence, but also I feel that there's a big counter narrative building of like, okay, this is what feminist climate justice futures and alternatives and actions look like. So moving away only from like pointing out at the holes in the systems, but also moving towards this is what feminist creation can do, right? Which I think it's really powerful and can push us to not only a dreaming stage, but actually an achievement of those dreams. And why did this happen? Or right, like the question including like, why is this the result of? And I think it has been achieved through continuous organizing. I think all of these spaces have contributed, like a space that we have right now, all of these spaces have contributed for us to collectively build collective language, build collective education, build collective political radical demands, and being really like an unapologetic anti-capitalist movement that is just done with systems of violence and the same, right, like pattern of patriarchy. And yeah, so I think it has been a collective community movement-wide effort to be where we're at.
Thank you so much, Maria, and thank you so much both for these beautiful and powerful insights. And it is true that it hasn't, these wins and these moments of celebration hasn't been a one-time moment, but we have been working hard for past many years to reach here, and we're continuing forward. And what we celebrate today is built upon the very many challenges that we navigate through in our spaces on a day-to-day basis, both within our organizations as well as our movements. So I'd like to ask our panelists, what has been an ongoing and a recent challenge that you're facing when it comes to advancing the movement further, and how are you growing and shifting through these challenges? Maria, would you like to go first?
Sure. I think there's many challenges, right? Like I would love for for this call to be like, well, let's celebrate, and at the same time, it's like shit. Currently, I am quite worried about the space that climate financing has taken within the conversations about alternatives and the conversations about how to achieve a fossil-free world. I think there's the mechanisms behind carbon offsetting, the mechanisms behind, like market-based mechanisms at the UN level are seeping into everywhere, basically, governments, non-profits, and they're like the amount of resources that these false solutions are sucking up is quite worrying to me, because they're gaining like these market-based mechanisms and these commodification of nature narratives and logics are so far away from the idea of movements being at the core of transformation. And I think it has given so much leeway to corporate lobby. And at the same time, they're like, even within the parameters of the climate talks, within the parameters of 1.5, hopefully, right, like limiting climate temperature rise to 1.5, even within that, even after pandemic or during pandemic, we can already see that still fossil fuel companies are keeping on profiting from the extraction, right? Like, and are bending the ideas of net zero pledges to their benefit, right? Like, the wealth is still being accumulated and extraction is still being enacted. So in some ways, I would say that the climate justice movement and the feminist climate justice movement is not winning. We're not winning there. We're not shifting the needle. We're not really like tackling the fossil fuel industry and everything that is behind it in a way that is effective, in a way that it's like at the scale that it's needed. And that's worrisome. And I would say that, I mean, it has to be a huge alarm for feminist climate justice activists and leaders all around, because we need to keep challenging not only the narrative, but also the practices of neoliberalization of nature. And in order to do that, movements, intersectional movements need like, I don't even know how to, like a cascade of resources, like a boost, an entrusted boost of resources that can actually drive us to places of winning and moving the needle towards those feminist climate justice realities and dreams that we really want to see. Over to you, Zainab.
I think I really agree with what you say, Maria, and it's just also a summary of how I feel in terms of what has been ongoing challenge. It's just, to me, it's always been, I think I joined the climate justice movement I'm still pretty new, 2019 or thereabout. And to me, what I've really observed and what I still see till now is leveraging on what Maria shared, is that it has always been profit over people. That's we negotiate, we talk, we do the movements, we do the meetings, but at the end of the day, the decision makers, the parties that are negotiating at those tables, what I see is that it's always power. It's always a fight for power. It's for profit. It's for power of state. It's for the government over the people that are actually affected by the impact of this climate change. And then when you're talking about perhaps an issue like sexual reproductive health and rights, like I referenced earlier, then you see that the challenge is even worse, because I'm talking about, I'd initially mentioned that people are not even prioritized, and you now have women and girls in their diversity being those that are directly affected, or worse, more affected by these particular issues of sexual reproductive health. And it's almost like it's zero. It's almost like they're non-existent and their issue. And we also have social cultural norms that are then ingrained in people, in the negotiators, in the countries. People have got their own beliefs, their own norms, their own biases, and they're coming to the table, and then you're trying to advocate for these issues that maybe they don't even agree with personally. So that is a challenge, trying to be able to advocate, trying to be able to lobby, trying to change mindsets, change orientation, trying to convince and make people see the importance, or how this is an issue, or how this is a challenge, in trying to advance on how it is a feminist issue, on how there is no climate justice without gender justice. It's a lot of talking and trying to make people see what you would think is obvious, an issue that you think this shouldn't be too hard. You should see that people are dying because they're not able to, access some of this, maybe funding, people having their lives and property damaged. We have loss and damage. People are not able to adapt, mitigation. But it's almost like too hard, and you have to do a lot of advocating. You have to do a lot of convincing. So that in its place, profit over people, social norms and mindsets and cultural norms, like people being fixated on that, is something that is a challenge that I've seen from since when I started, and it's something that's really blocking, or it's a barrier that is really challenging the movement. And what I'd say in terms of how I'm growing or shifting through this challenge is that what I've learned is that if we work in solidarity, one person cannot do this alone, or even say one thematic area or one sector, or maybe the academics alone, and then leaving out the civil society, or even this private sector that Maria mentioned, that we see are coming into this space and are occupying it. I think it's about seeing how we can then use them for our own purpose. It's not. I always find it controversial to say, or maybe leave out private sector as a whole, or not. It's not about including them. It's about letting them know what we want and seeing how we can tell them, or then reject some of all these greenwashing false solution. They come with carbon markets to confuse us, net zero, and at the end of the day, they're not even there. They don't care about these things. They care about profit, like Maria mentioned. And so trying to make sure that we, as a civil society, work in solidarity, which is something that I've seen. I always reference sexual reproductive health and right, because that's my area of interest and focus. But what I've seen with advancing sexual reproductive health and right in the climate justice space is seeing, you see women's rights organization, you see Young Feminists, you see what is it called? Health institutions, academics, you see them coming together, working in solidarity. We have the youth groups as well. We have got the LGBTQ groups. Everyone is coming together to say this is important, and all of these sectors, we're going to stand for this same purpose. We're coming together in solidarity to fight for this one thing, and this is what we want. And so I think rather than working in silos, rather than working separately in the individual small circle or group, coming together in solidarity to have one voice is something that I've seen that is working, is advancing the progress that we're making in terms of and climate justice as it refers to issues that affect marginalized group. And that is something that I would encourage more, or push for more of that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zainab and Maya, for highlighting these challenges and what you have found to be working for us to be moving forward by negotiating or dismantling or shifting through these challenges. Thank you so much for sharing these and highlighting these. With that, since we only have half an hour left, we come to the second part of the meetup, where we would like to listen more from all of you present here, all of our participants, and we will be moving into small breakout rooms to carry on the conversations within the smaller groups, where we get to know each other better and draw joy and some inspiration from the space we come together in. So I would request my colleague Mara to help us with the breakout rooms.
Wonderful. All right. I am currently getting them organized. There's going to be 2 rooms. There will be one breakout room that will be speaking in English, and there will be one breakout room, the main room, which will remain with interpretation, and folks can engage in Spanish, French, or English. So I'll take a quick moment here to say, if you would like to stay in the main room and engage in French or Spanish, could you please put that at the front of your Zoom name? And the way that you can do that is by scrolling to the participants list, finding your own name, clicking on more, rename, and adding Spanish, French, anything you would like to indicate. And I'll just leave a minute right now for folks to do that. And then we will separate into our breakout rooms and have wonderful conversations. Also wanting to lift up the note in the chat, Suman, maybe if folks are coming back at the end, or if we want to make space for that now, unsure.
We will be coming back in the end after the breakout rooms for a few minutes, so we can have a Q&A with the panelists.
Wonderful. All right, I'm going to go ahead and divide us into breakout rooms. There's going to be a bit of movement in the beginning, so feel free to introduce yourselves at the start. And if a few folks sort of hop on or off, we'll be settled soon. So enjoy your conversations all.
A social, cultural, and a mindset change, which advocates that people who are impacted the most, who are the most vulnerable, they have the lived experience and expertise to frame policies on issues that affect them, and they are experts on that matter.
Hi, folks. Welcome back to the main room. We were just wrapping up the last question. We actually had to divide some of the questions into two so that we could go through all of them, seeing that we were a bigger group. But yeah, we're just reflecting on feminist climate justice visions and what we needed to make those happen. Someone mentioned a Q&A before we entered the breakout rooms, and I was wondering whether, Suman, we still have time for that. I know that it's 2 minutes to the closing, so just wanted to see whether we could go a bit over time or whether you want me to wrap up.
Maybe we can take one question. I don't know who, not sure who that request was from, but maybe we can take that one question and then move toward closing.
Hello.
Go for it. I don't know if you had any questions to the panelists before the breakout rooms, but that was
Hello.
You can hear us? Can you hear us?
Hello.
Yes, we're here. We can hear you.
Hi, Elsie. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. I just had a question about the what best practices that people have in the education area, because I think educating school children from a young age would also assist in this regard, where we create awareness, but we also train people to become activists. I think one of the biggest challenges we have in Botswana, in the SADC region, young women feminists and activists. They are there. They are part of the gender movement. They are critical gender program officers in the rural communities, but they are not activists. And civil society can play a key role in terms of training and empowering young people, but young women and girls in particular, to become feminist activists. Now, of course, we still have a problem in some parts of Africa where feminism is not a word that is used very much in terms of an ideology that informs us as gender activists. So we need activism, very strong education at a very young age, right from school, in the communities, where we can basically create a whole group of activists within our rural communities. Thank you. But I'd like to know one best practice, if there is time, of what anybody has tried that has worked. Because sometimes we do things and they don't work as well as we expect, given our social cultural situation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't know if you can drop your best practices in the chat because we're running out of time. And it is unfortunately my duty to close the space at this time and thank everybody for your generosity and for being so open today to share your experiences and your wisdom, especially the speakers and also the translators for helping us really weave ties across these different geographies and facilitating these intercultural dialogues. And also obviously thank WEDO for all the heavy lifting that they did into organizing this event and making this thing happen. So I think we can all agree that, as Maria Alejandra said, that these young feminist spaces are just so important and we need to keep nurturing them. So also for those of you who are interested in staying in touch, but also want to be kept in the loop about future events that we'll be organizing, please let us know in the chat. And also if any of you are organizing young feminist events in the future, especially perhaps around COP, for example, let us know in the chat as well, and we will help amplify those events that you're organizing. But yeah, just wanted to thank you so much again for being here and for your time and the energy that you've dedicated to the space and preparing the space. So I really hope that, yeah, you have restful mornings, afternoon, or evenings, wherever you are, and really hope that we can cross paths again very soon. And back to you, Sanam.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for facilitating.
Suman, do you want to take it over?
Yeah, thank you so much everyone for joining us today. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, but hopefully we'll be organizing many more such meetups and we all can gather together. And this was really great to have you all here and have the kind of engagement that we had and the conversation that we had. Thank you and have a great day, evening, and see you again in our next event whenever we can make that possible.